how sports prepared you or taught you certain lessons that have had the biggest impact on your approach to consulting.
When folks have certain agendas, certain things they want to accomplish personally, aligning to some type of teamwork framework to drive to that overall success, and we'll all reap the benefits of it.
What's a skill that was super transferable, a great skill that was important to have as a consultant?
That's great. Right to the heart right away, Griffin. For me,
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of Power Talks. My name is Griffin Lickfelt, the host of the Citizen Developer channel, and today I am joined by special guest Doc Schneider. Now, Doc, you have a background in athletics and sports, and I know that's something that we naturally connected on right away. Now, kind of the first question I wanted to ask you, and maybe something that people think about all the time, is, how sports now have, prepared you or taught you certain lessons about consulting. And I want to read this. I don't want to get it wrong. You were the 2018 NCAA Division I Assistant Coach of the Year. And this is an incredible accomplishment. But I wanted to ask you, what are some leadership lessons from your coaching and athletic career that have had the biggest impact on your approach to consulting?
That's great. Right to the heart right away, Griffin. For me, and rewards or accolades aside, anytime there are accolades, that's a reflection of being part of a great team, right? So in my coaching career, that was always prevalent, right? If we had a great team, it was a reflection, people would see rewards, right? And when I have transitioned into the consulting world, I don't think that's any different, right? The overall success of a project, of a program, right? Overall success repetitively with a client, wherever that might be, that will fill the cup of the individuals, right? And so I think a lot of times when folks have certain agendas, right, certain things they want to accomplish personally, right, which we all do in our professional lives, aligning to some type of teamwork framework, right, to drive to that overall success, and we'll all reap the benefits of it. So whether it was 2018, whether it's a successful 18-month implementation project, right, if we do things the right way, individuals be recognized for their hard work.
Yeah. So there's probably too many to count, but what's a skill that you feel like you played lacrosse and coached lacrosse? What's a skill that you learned from being a lacrosse player and a lacrosse coach that was super transferable, a great skill that was important to have as a consultant?
Excellent. Yeah, for me, first and foremost, so I was a goalie in lacrosse, right? Kind of, you think about the quarterback on the field, right?
Well, I don't know. I didn't realize you were a goalie. People say goalies are the weirdos. So
no, I'm pretty straightforward. I can't. My thumbs. I say I'm like a cat sometimes. My thumbs don't work. I don't really have thumbs, but no. For me, communication and the ability to communicate in different ways, right? I think lacrosse aside, athletics, right? What we do, it's really getting the opportunity to meet with a ton of different people from a ton of different backgrounds that learn differently, communicate differently, accept praise, accept critique differently, right? So I think whether it's been coaching or as a player, right, I've always considered myself a leader, right? And for me, having a captain title, right, that doesn't matter. I think leadership, right, is many different flavors, many different ways. But your ability to communicate with folks in an individual way, but then communicate to a team, right? I think that's the piece that I've gotten the most from my athletic career, right, is that not everything is one way, right? You can have the ability to really connect with folks in different ways and still get to the same goal.
Yeah. Communication is something that we've talked a lot about on this show, and I think it's one of two of the most valuable skills. Like if you can communicate with, like you said, pretty much everything we're doing is with somebody, with a team.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Unless you're just like a one-man show entrepreneur or something. But at the end of the day, you're still working with other people. Like, really, no matter what you're doing or what you do for work, you need to be able to communicate effectively. And so, being a good communicator, if you can level up being a good communicator, you instantly become better at your job,
Absolutely.
and whatever that job is.
Yeah, and I think when I think of communication, right, which is just, it's like leadership, right? It's a buzzword in a sense, right? But communication to me, first and foremost, it's a two-way street, right? My ability whether it is in consulting on a project, internal ways of working, you have to listen, right? If you want to be a leader, you have to be able to intake what the people you are leading, right, have to say, and then meet in the middle, right? So I think, you bring up a great point. Communication is constant, but sometimes, right, there's a fine line between communication and really just saying, hey, I'm talking about what's in my head. Am I listening, right? And I think that piece, and that happens all the time, right? And I think the ability to, we always talk about, right, be in the weeds, really focused on a certain task, communicating, right, executing on something, then to be able to raise up, look at things at a larger scale, that takes active listening, right? So I always love the communication piece, and mixing that in with active listening is essential.
Sure. So I guess I kind of wanted to ask you too, because a lot of the audience and people I have on this show are related to power platform dynamic space. So they're clued into, projects and working with clients. So I kind of wanted to ask you, what does that like practically mean? You're talking about communicating and, everything you were just saying
No,
there.
it's
Like, what does
so
that? It's funny. Whenever I'm talking about consulting, it always reminds me of those like jokes where it's like, what do business consultants actually do, though?
100%,
I'd love to
100%.
hear like what it is that, like, I guess what do
Yeah.
you do in a little bit more detail?
Absolutely. So for me, right, on the advisory strategy side, my job is to, right, hear the clients, right, understand their pain points, and then marry that up with the unbelievable technology stack, whatever that might be, right? And I think that's a very high level assessment of it. With all of that, it's building trust, right? It's making sure that we are tackling the right things, right? You hear the term of business value, right? The coach in me says perception's reality, right? So unless the client believes there's value to that, right, it's something that needs to be clearly articulated, communicated, right? I love the idea of taking process, right? And whether that's internal ways of working, framework for implementation, collaboration, ways of working, all of those things take process, especially in a remote world, right? How are we going to meet? What's going to be our cadence, right? What are we constantly tackling? And being able to do that day by day, right? And then have a grand goal in mind. But I think for me, process, right, is the best way to be in the shoes of your client, right? And we say it all the time, whether it's coaching, I've used it, right, internally with our teams. Really, no one cares what you know until they know you care, right? Great Theodore Roosevelt quote. But for me, building that trust, having folks open up, really, right, let their guard down. When we come in on a project, Griffin, right, if we think about folks we're working with, there's uncertainty. What does this mean, right? What are we doing? How's this going to change my world? You need to dive into that, right? You need to let them know, hey, we understand that. There's going to be time to that, set expectations, and bring those folks along. And to me, there's no difference in that between being a coach, right? You have a new season, a new start. Here's our goals. Here's our ways of working. Does this align with you? Let's be collaborative in that, and then let's drive towards that together.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I feel like something I have been learning a lot more of recently is, maybe it was foolish, but I feel like I was taking an approach to a lot of my projects that, you know, every product owner and every person I talked to on the client was really excited to be working with us, or really excited for the change that we were implementing. And I mean, I'm a great guy. They love working with me. That's not what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, I'm kind of here to mess up their hair, I guess, in a way. It's like, hey, we're fixing this, or
Yeah.
this
Well,
is
I
horrible.
think I think
We need to
the
work on this.
messing up, to your point though, it's great. It's like the perception of that, right?
Yeah.
Initially, some folks might be really open to the change, right? Some folks, right? And we go back to our athletic careers. It's the same thing, right, Griffin? I'm sure in college you were asked to do something and you go, that doesn't feel right. I got to trust this person, right? That they know what they're doing to have me change my ways, right? And I use that word trust because I think, to your point, that is going to be the initial reaction for a lot of people. I don't know you, you don't know me. How do I know my best interests are in your intent, right? And I think that is paramount as we're doing all the amazing things, right, from a solution perspective, whatever that might look like, right? Nailing those business requirements, bringing that value. People need to feel that value and anticipate that before it even comes to life, right? I think that is one thing that I've learned more so than anything is when you are coaching and you have a long season, you have games, you have milestones constantly, right? So you're able to kind of almost drive the team to those. in implementations, when we work with our clients, those milestones, sometimes you need to create those, right? You need to create those small wins. There's times where you feel like, hey, Griffin, right? You feel like you're working, you're turning the wrenches, we're doing all these things. What were we doing this for again? Right? And so that constant reminder of the objective to keep people along, because when we think about, and you had asked earlier about what I bring to projects and what we look to bring to projects, right? Leadership is something that a lot of people that you've talked to, and I'm sure, right, that will talk and look at this, have opinions on. And there's no right way to do it. That's what's beautiful about leadership, right? But for me, it's leading your internal team, right? And really, right, we are in professional services, what's best for the client and articulating that to our team. But it's also articulating to the client and bringing them along in the journey, right? That to me is something where, hey, don't worry, in 18 months, you're going to be fired up, right? It's being able to articulate every step of the way why we are doing this, what the benefits are, and in that, you build trust, right? And those don't have to be long conversations, Griffin, right? We're all busy and all those things. But when you were saying on the advisory, the partnership side, it's just a quick check-in. It's letting the client know, hey, we are constantly thinking about how we can improve your ways of working now and in the future, and would love to hear your feedback on it. And that iterative approach is something you need to do over time.
Sure. So how does this apply, in getting to know you, use the saying breaking down silos and building up teams.
Mm-hmm.
How does everything, maybe break that down and talk about what that means and how, because I think that applies to the conversation we're having now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In projects, right, you have different work streams, right? You have different folks. You have folks from different countries. I mean, that's what I love about it, right? And the ability to understand that, hey, your responsibilities when we get together as a project team are to our team, right? And being able to constantly bring those folks together. And really to do that, Griffin, you need to understand what both sides need, right? So if we have two different work streams, right, you know this more than anything, there's very rare times that we're not dependent on one another, right? Calling out that dependency, that relationship, and how we need one another internally and driving to that, that's leadership, right? That's taking people's heads, right? Bringing them up a little bit, taking a level up, right? I know you have your task, you have your task, right? This is how we could actually make this a better ways of working, right? And I think when we talk about, and I'm going back to the word leadership, when I say breaking down silos, it's not a forceful, right, dictatorship. Listen, we're going to start meeting together. That's incorrect, right? That's forcing, right? That's not necessarily the right way to do it, in my opinion. It's more so about, right, when we get together as a team in leadership, is creating an environment for collaboration, right? And I think that is a big piece sometimes. It's not leading the meeting, right? Sometimes that's important, right, in keeping folks organized, but it's actually what are ways to get these folks together? What are ways for folks to know that, hey, Griffin, right, from North Dakota, good guy, he's got a wife and kid, right? I got a wife and kids, right? Whatever that is, but really creating relationships personally in a remote world is challenging, right? Because if we had a meeting for 30 minutes, Griffin, and the meeting adjourned, maybe we go get coffee together. That doesn't exist sometimes in a remote world. So
I completely agree.
Right? So you got to create environments, and not every meeting needs to be, boom, to the T, right? Some meetings are just team building internally, right? Because you know, and I know, when a push comes to shove and maybe an email comes across at 4:00 on a Friday, right? But if I really care about my team members and I'm looking out for them, maybe I forward that on to my team members and say, hey, just looking out for you, right? This applies to you, right? And that level of care and relationships internally, there is no doubt in my mind, right? That keeps the train on the tracks, right? Because if folks actually care about each other's success, right, and you can create that in a remote setting, you have something special on a project team, for sure.
Sure. So you just gave one example, I guess, forwarding an email, being a good communicator, even on Friday afternoons. But what are some other practical tips, piece of advice, things you try to do that help build collaborative environments, especially in a hybrid or in a remote
Absolutely.
scenario?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times, right, and this goes back to my role on projects, I'm very fortunate. I'm naturally in that position. And what I mean by that is, right, maybe there's a technical requirement, or maybe there's something right on the development side that we need to really articulate the business value and get the business feeds back on, right? And a lot of times it's working with our internal team, surfacing up what needs right at a high level and bringing that to the client in a very digestible fashion, right? So in that piece, you want to call it a high profile liaison? Absolutely, right? I'm a translator, I'm a doc connector in that regard. And it's the same thing internally, right? There's times we're on calls, right? My job is we might be talking about something, right? That's not necessarily an end user experience or something that might hit to the end user. I have to be thinking about what could that affect in our project, right? Bring that to our team, calling out those roadblocks proactively, right? And I think when you had said earlier, and it's really interesting about, right, the business value, when you talk about what we do in terms of any type of implementation, it is constantly, as we are doing refinement, as we are in there, right, in the weeds building, we are constantly targeting the end goal in mind, right? Every single thing we do, that acceptance criteria, whatever that might be, what is the business value tied to that? And making sure that that business value that we really discovered initially, right, and maybe the beginning phases, that is driven home every step of the way with every single thing being built.
Hey, if you are finding this video impactful or insightful, be sure to like and subscribe. But more importantly, if you are wanting to learn more about the Microsoft Power Platform, then you are going to want to check out the completely free self-paced course that has all of the hand-picked content directly from me as the first link down in the description down below. This is going to teach you everything you need to know about the Power Platform to get started and pass your first few Microsoft certifications. I can honestly say that as a Power Platform consultant myself, that I love what I do, and I don't think many people in today's day and age can say that. If you are wanting to learn more, as I mentioned, be sure to check out the first link in the description down below to get in direct contact and connect with me. All right, let's get back to the conversation. That drives another question, and I'll start with, I guess, a testimony from me. So I feel like I was on a project previously where we lost sight of the why a little bit. Like, we lost sight of the big picture end goal, and I think that kind of, in a technical sense, we ended up kind of working on stuff that was out of scope. And then even though I'd say like we delivered on the project, it didn't feel like a win, you know? And I think it was because we lost track of the why, and I guess more the what we were working on, or what we were building, or the business value we were trying to deliver. I guess I kind of wanted to ask you, how do you break down this why? How do you make it your North Star and keep it your North Star, so that it kind of helps drive successful project outcomes?
Yeah. No, I think it's, first and foremost, right? That North Star, when we think about, and I go back to seasons and athletically, right? You have your goals for the year. I want to go undefeated, whatever that might be. That North Star, to me, those goals are all results, right? They're all going to be results, to your point, of staying true to our process and what we're delivering, right? And if we do that, that North Star will achieve it. Our goals will achieve themselves. I think of a lot of times, and you went back to the tactical ways of doing it. I love process. Right? That's the coach in me. That's how I act, right? That's kind of how I operate. And it's not necessarily process when I say rigid, but it's being able to, in my opinion, when you think of a process, right? Someone's process, that's the best way, Griffin, for myself to connect with someone else on my team, right? We are aligned on this process. Hey, this is why that requirement's there. This is going to help optimize this process, or this is a pain point in that. And so
when you say process, you're talking like a business process, like
business process, exactly, right? If we're building out for me, right, I want to know your current state, right? Future state, right? We're going to be able to do this. I want to know currently what you're going through, bring that to our team, right? And then the bright minds go, hey, these, right, from a solution perspective, right, between that, right? I'm getting dangerous there myself, but it's really bringing those pain points and really using that unified really artifact, right? I think a lot of times, instead of me saying, hey, Griffin, here's 30 minutes, this is the issue, can you go solve that, right? No, let's look at this process. This is where they hit roadblocks. Is there a way for us to really support this? This is the requirement around this. And using that to then go build that future state, that's an incredible thing, right? Because not only are you articulating, right, the pain points and living in the shoes of your client, right, which makes them feel great. All right, they're understanding, they're speaking our language, they're understanding our culture, right, which is really important. I'm also able to really bring that information maybe in a different way to some of our implementation teammates, right? And that's almost like our commonality, right? How can we, right, this process step, how can we make this better? Here's the requirement. And that's a very simple version, but I will say to start projects, I have found that to be extremely beneficial, not only for building rapport and truly getting that experience that the client is going through, but also articulating that to your team, right? And I think that's something, it doesn't have to be flushed out, but anytime you're able to share that kind of common artifact, that thing, that visual, I'm a visual guy, I think it's been really, really successful in kind of connecting those dots.
Yeah. Maybe this is on the spot, but do you have a good story? Like, do you have a good example of a time where managing expectations or, keeping the North Star in your,
Yeah.
in front of you, like, really helped ensure the success of a project? And like I said, maybe this is on the spot, but
No, put me on the spot. That's the idea. That's the idea. I think, right, and you're bringing up something that sings true to my heart because I think it's ultimately what makes projects successful is when there are roadblocks, when there are challenges, right? When you don't have framework, when you don't have process, and it's called a project for a reason, right? It's not going to be smooth sailing, right? It's a project, right? There's going to be things that we're going to have to work on together, right? Whatever that might be. But when I think about, our team and all the highs and lows, instead of personally potentially attacking someone or calling someone out or saying, hey, you missed the mark here, let's go back to our North Star, right? If there's tough decisions or maybe there's obstacles and we need to pivot, we need to be agile, that's when the North Star is imperative, right? Hey, does this fall within what we are trying to accomplish? And Griffin, you bring up your example before, that is to the T, right? If I don't, everyone needs to know what we're working towards at a high level because we all are accountable to making sure we're delivering, right? And we're not going off and diverting, right? And I think I go back to when there's tough times, right? And the what hits the fan, right? And this is something Greg Cannella, my mentor, right, head coach at UMass for 30 plus years. What's our shelter, right? What is our Alamo? What is going to be our foundation? Okay, right? Hiccups happen, people make mistakes, right? There's a dependency we didn't track and it's blowing things off the door. Let's go back to our North Star. What is the most important things to this project, right? And we will make decisions together off of that. Not reactively, not, oh my goodness, right? And right, relationships, personal things get into it. It's inevitable, right? There's a lot of pride of authorship, all those things. But I think having those tough conversations and leveraging a process or a framework, right, or a North Star, those are all tools, right? Being able to leverage those that you establish in a collaborative manner at the forefront of the project, that takes the personal attack out. That goes, hey guys, right, we knew this was going to happen. And some flavor, right? You can't anticipate everything, but let's go back to what our goals are. What are we trying to achieve? Does this fit in it? If we go in this direction, are we still able to do that, right? And I think those tools, people, you could check the box and create them, or you can leverage them throughout a project. And that's something I would challenge to anyone, right? You create these things in a good, exciting way in the beginning, and sometimes do they get, collect dust. Our North Star is constantly being talked about. We're constantly remembering, right, what we are going towards, because there are days, Griffin, right? Fatigue sets in. These are long seasons. These are long projects. No different, right? And when that fatigue sets in, that's when, as a leader, you got to realize, hey, we need a break. Not saying, hey, sometimes that's vacation, absolutely, but maybe we just need a 30-minute just talk shop, right? Like we're doing right now, right? Relax a little bit, then get back to it. And I think once again, going back to a remote world, that's super challenging, right? So creating those environments, going back to that, realizing when your team's burning out a little bit internally, and also the client, right? And I think the North Star is a great place to start with that when you're feeling that as well.
Yeah. When you remind me of, like, just talking about North Star goals and everything, I think some of the best piece of advice I got as far as goals go, I guess I want to share. It was this idea that when you are looking at your goal, you need to be able to look at it through like a telescope in the sense of, and I learned it in applying to football from a coach.
Absolutely.
But I think this was super beneficial, and I'll explain how I think it ties into our work still. So basically, what the principle was is, for the sports analogy, like the goal, win a championship, and at whatever level that is. But you need to be able, and you can like zoom in on, on your telescope all the way, and hey, a year from now we want to win a championship. But
Mhm.
on a telescope, you can kind of zoom out a little bit. And so it's like, okay, a year from now, we want to do this. What does this mean in, for the next 4 quarters we need to do? For the next 4 quarters, we need to, for the summer, we need to make sure we have everybody at every workout and we have hit these sort of numbers in the weight room. And then in the fall, we need to, have this sort of record and, whatever, right?
Mhm.
And so being able to zoom out, but then being able to zoom out into, okay, what do we need to do for the next 4 weeks? Like
Yep.
every Saturday, we need to hit these sort of things. Okay. And then zooming out, what do we need to do every day this week? And then zooming out, okay, what do we need to do during this 15-minute period of practice for today, to make sure that we hit today's goal, to make sure we hit this week's goal, this quarter, you know what I mean? And kind
Absolutely.
of that idea. And I think as far as sports go, it would apply in that, like, okay, no, if my goal is to win a championship, then in order to win a championship, I play defensive line. I need to be stronger, all right? I need to be able to try to push around some 330-pound fat guys, all right? Sorry if you play O-line out there, but, I need to be strong enough to push around those guys. So what does that mean? That means on this, I need to do add these extra 5 pounds on my set of back squat here. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yep.
In April,
Yep. And
so
how are
it's
you going
like
to do that? I got to work out one more day, right? Absolutely.
exactly. So
Absolutely.
it's
Yep.
like you can just apply it. And how does that, I guess, apply to work as well? The
Yeah.
end goal being a successful or a successful project or delivering more, over what's it called, over delivering even.
Yeah.
That could be the goal.
Absolutely.
So
Out
what
kicking the
does that
coverage, they
mean?
say.
Exactly. So like,
Right.
what
Yeah.
does that mean as far as bringing that down into the day to day? It means
Absolutely.
meeting with my team, building rapport, making sure none of us are burning out, making sure I'm getting my work done, making sure I'm thoroughly testing my work, and how all of that plays into the bigger picture. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
Am I
No,
just
because
yapping here?
no, you're not yapping because that's why, personally and I feel like this is a natural fit for me, right? This kind of profession because there's so many correlations to that, Griffin, right? 100%. And I think of how do you keep folks motivated day to day, right? You have your own internal motivation, Griffin, right? You are who you are, but how do I constantly tell folks, hey, this is what we're going towards, like to you said, that telescope down the road. I think a lot of times where I would challenge the notion of, hey, we want to go undefeated or we want to win a championship, right? Or hey, we want to go live with no bugs, right? Whatever it might be, it's all the same, right? You have those goals. My focus constantly with our teams is what are the day-to-day processes that those goals will naturally happen, right? So I challenge that notion even as a coach, right? We would always, I want to go undefeated. I want to win a national championship. Great. How we're going to do that is 1,000,000 times more important than the result because Griffin, you could work hard every single day, right? You could do it every quarter, right? You could get stronger, right? And you could feel you're pushing that guy out, right? But all of a sudden you run into that, right, first round draft pick and life changes, right? So my point being is you did everything right until that piece. The result, that moment might not have been what you wanted, but in the grand scheme of things, if we keep doing that, we will get to where we need to be. And I think that's a great example of what we just talked about, right? I'm doing everything right, we're doing everything right, and it goes off the rails, right? Something happens on the client side, something happens personally in your life, whatever that might be. That's why I'm very, very focused on controlling those controllables, right? Looking at things from a day to day. And Griffin, like you said, having those mini wins, right? Because you're talking about length, right? Length of time, right? It's easy to stay fired up and engaged for maybe 4 weeks. 40 weeks is a little different, right? So I think of a lot of those things. If we are focused on goals that we cannot control, right? Outputs we cannot control yet, right? You can't control. They could be the best team ever, right? Could have the, whatever it was, the undefeated Dolphins you're playing against. But I did everything correct. You can live with that, right? And you won't fall that short. And I think a lot of times when we're doing projects, I think of the same exact thing. Nothing is going to be perfect, but if we have a process, if we're working together, if we're working hard, if we're staying true to the North Star and everything we set out, we do that consistently as possible, knowing we will never be perfect, we will get pretty close, right? And we'll have a happy customer, we'll have a partner for life, and we'll have a happy delivery team, right? And we always talk about having fun, right? And I love to have fun at work, right? And people's definitions of fun are different. For me, fun is those challenges, Griffin. Like exactly what you're talking about. On a Thursday, someone's not in a blue space, they're not feeling great, they're feeling a little lost. Hey, real quick, let's talk about how the value you're adding, why the client needs you, why you're needed. And folks need that, right? I need that. We all need that. We're natural, right? Kind of that appreciation, all those mini wins. That's why when you were growing up and I was growing up, folks would say, hey, be more focused on practice, right, than game day. Because game day is a result, right? What we do throughout the week, right? That is more important how we operate every day. So I'm totally with you. I think anyone that has a magic potion to that would probably be making a ton of money. I think there's a very open way to do that, right? But it takes a leader that has emotional intelligence, and those leaders can be multiple. There's not one leader on a team. There's just different maybe levels, maybe different avenues they lead, different ways, but we're all accountable to those goals, right? That being said, they'll take care of themselves if we do things the right way.
Sure. I think that's
the
awesome.
coach talk for you, right? You're like,
yeah, right. All right, let's break it down. Let's get out of here. All right. No, that's what's up, Doc. I appreciate that, and I think, I don't think I could necessarily add anything to what you said there. I'd love to transition the conversation just a little bit in that, kind of practically a lot of what we do, and especially yourself, you're leading working sessions, or at least facilitating working sessions, discovery sessions as we might call them, like understanding the business processes, the pain points they have in this process. I'd love to kind of ask you, a little bit more, what do you do to make these meetings fun, practical, have positive outcomes, make them effective? That's, I guess, the question I'd love to ask. Like, what are the Doc Schneider's tips and tricks to leading a great discovery session? Like what do we got?
I love it. Oh man, Doc's tips and tricks. So, Coach Doc. No, I think for when you're doing facilitations, it depends. Everything's context for me. If, say, it's a brand new, net new person, they don't know me, right? Maybe a little bit, I don't know them. It's humanizing the entire experience, right? Another buzzword, right? And we can get excited about it. But for me, it's genuinely letting that client know that I am a person that cares, right? That I am going to learn, right? I don't know everything. I think that's the biggest thing. Let's come into this meeting extremely humble, right? I think clients pick that up right away. Hey, there's no judgment. That's my kind of the ground rules of our facilitation. There is no judgment. Speak your thoughts, right? We are here to listen, learn from you. I think it's more so what is the expectations of that workshop, right? Making that very clear to the client. Why am I here for 2 hours? Why did you take me out of my 2-hour day, right? And I'm super busy on my other job. Why am I here? First point. Then, who am I talking to? Not Doc, the consultant, Doc Schneider, the father, right? Doc Schneider, the coach, Doc Schneider, the advisor that's going to get to know you really well, right? And that's not a speech that kicks off facilitation. That's how you act consistently throughout the facilitation, right? So we'll do, any type of, icebreakers, absolutely, right? Biggest thing is, when you do that icebreaker, you carry it into the next one. So they know you're listening, right? So folks know, hey, this is not a check the box, right? We're going to build relationship, right? So my icebreakers are very intentional. A lot of times they build on each other. I try to get a story on whoever's in there over a couple of working sessions with just some icebreakers, right? What's your summer song? The kind of music you listen to. So when we do get on calls for 30 minutes, those first 5 minutes, Griffin, you bring up something I'm excited about. I always tell our delivery team, we got to win the first 5 minutes of every meeting, right? And what is that? When we get on calls, how many times do people wait 2-3 minutes for someone to kick it off, right? That like awkward, cameras are coming on, cameras are off, right? Camera on, going to win that meeting. And how do I do that, right? I got to know you, right? I got to be able to say, hey, Griffin, what's the weather like? I looked it up. North Dakota, it's 10 degrees. You all right? And we have that moment, but you build that up over 18 months, right? On the relationship trust side, humanizing it, right? It's nothing special. It's not a 20-page PowerPoint that we're pushing down, right? It's genuinely building relationships and friendships and trust, right? While living in their shoes. So I think that when you were saying facilitation tools and tips, if you have the opportunity, let them just talk about their current process. What is bothering them, right? A lot of times we want to dive right into requirements, right? And drill into what we need from a technology standpoint, which is very important, right? Initially, though, get it out, right? Mini therapy session, right? Let's walk through it, right? And you have frameworks and you have current state and you got to keep them within that realm, right? But Griffin, you know for a day, if I were to ask you what your current process is for you to execute your work, Griffin, you naturally talking about that, I could pull requirements out of that all day. Pain points are requirements just as must-haves and nice-to-haves and the beautiful future, right? So I think initially you have to the client has to feel like you are in their shoes. So when I start facilitations, however I can get there as quickly as possible, learn their culture, learn the type of people they are, right? That's my first goal. Then after that, if we have that trust and they're very clear on what's next, right? We go into the next facilitation. Hey, we said what's next last time. Quick recap. You have to constantly build. You have to constantly feed people information. And I think that's something you have to be extremely intentional about, right? That to me is, when I say humanizing the experience, it's like intentionally growing relationships and learning about other people. Right? And for us, we're professional services. We come in. It is a two-way street eventually, right? I have to open up. They have to learn who I am, right? But they have to know that I just want to genuinely get to know that person. We'll tackle this technology, but how we communicate, we go back to the beginning, right? There's certain ways to communicate. I have to learn that about you. Are you a visual person, right? Are you someone that needs to see something, right? The seeing is believing, right? Are you someone that just needs to get it out? Right? Talk through it. I'll go back to the transcripts. I'll pull it out and we iterate on that. So facilitation, all of those things, it's genuinely letting folks know why they are here, the value in being here, and where we are going, and keeping folks along. Because as soon as I have that meeting, Griffin, they're part of the team, right? They're part of the team. I think there is no, in my opinion, you have your team and the client, right? The quicker we can make that one team, the quicker our facilitation goes. They open up, we really pull out things that we need, and then we set ourselves up for a successful implementation.
Cool. So
you're getting me excited, man. I think I might be sweating on this. I don't know if I don't know if we're going to facilitate a workshop, go for a run, something, do something.
And you may have answered this next question already, but I'd like to still ask it. What do you feel like is one of the most common challenges that you face? Like, maybe it's, making the client warm up to you a little bit, or humanizing yourself, or, whatever it might be. But like, what's a common challenge that you feel like you consistently face across organizations and across projects to do that?
It's pretty simple. I think it's genuinely the what, the why, and the how. It is always those things. I think it depends on what you need to lean into more, but what I think is the biggest challenge is our ways of working, right, are different. Hard stop, right? They're going to be different than XYZ client. So I think a lot of times there are things that we need to do. I think the biggest challenge, and Griffin, you bring this up, there are certain things that we need to do because we need to do them. It's leading practices, right? It is how we as a company optimize our ways of working. And sometimes that could rub, right, or cause friction in maybe the way the client works, right? And I think finding that common ground, right, and really not saying, well, no, this is the way we're doing it, come hell or high water. It's really saying, listen, this is what our team needs to be successful, right? We could think about blockers, and not something as specific as that, but I think you've experienced it on your projects as well, where, hey, this is the way we do things. You have a way of doing things. How do we actually find that middle ground, right? Because until that happens, that for some folks is trust, right? You know, when you think of people and the type of people, they need to trust how this is going to happen, right? How am I going to work with Griffin to make this happen? That I think is extremely challenging, especially for people that have been ultra successful, right? Ultra successful in something they've done. We're with our clients because they've been super successful, right? These are people that are really smart, really great at what they do, and sometimes breaking down that barrier to let them know we're here to help, not judge, right? Not Monday morning quarterback your work, right? We're here to help you because you guys have been so great at what you do. That piece I think is really challenging, right? I think that is, and that to me though, that challenge is like 1 out of 1. I love it more than anything, right? Because if you can overcome that and they understand, hey, this is why Griffin and his team need to work in this fashion, but here's the value you're getting from that. Hey, here's the opportunity for your team to potentially learn from that and vice versa. That's super important, right? And I'm sure I'd love to maybe even hear from you, right? Like kind of, hey, well, we do it this way. I do it this way. So which way prevails? Usually it's how do we bring that together?
Sure. I don't want to possibly clue into which project this was, so I'll try to stay as as
Hey, don't you have the editing
undisclosed as possible. Yeah, I guess I could cut it out, but no. So I was on a project where I think the way the architect may have gone, basically the client and the architect disagreed on how we should structure their data. You know, like
Yep.
what the, as far as like best practices and what they currently have. And I mean, I loved working with the team, but their data was pretty bad, like
Yep.
just as plainly as we can say it. And the structure was really bad, and so we wanted to, change it and use a model that is a little bit more, kind of best practice. And
Yep.
I maybe it was just the way the architect communicated this, or both sides were sticking to their guns,
Yep.
basically. And I think that it kind of turned into it almost became like, well, no, this is what we're gonna do because this is what I want.
And then what are we
And
doing
I
again,
think,
right? If you forget the
yeah,
mission.
right. And I think there was just not like there wasn't necessarily a ton of trust from the client to this person, and I definitely think that like severely impacted the project in a really negative way, because it was like, I mean, at the end of the day, we are the experts. Like, we
Mhm.
understand data and CRM
Absolutely.
systems and processes and Microsoft Dynamics and the Power Platform. Like, we understand that more than the client. And so you would think that that means, hey, if we say, hey, you need to do it this way, that they'd be like, okay, you're the expert. But that was
Mhm.
just not the case at all. And I think the
Absolutely.
communication was really poor at that time, and it just made the project hard
Yep. And it's no,
to say it.
but you say something super interesting is you're 1,000% right. We are the experts, right? We have a unbelievable depth of knowledge, our folks, and the experience, right, and all the things that you research. I think it nails to my initial when we said perception is reality, right? If that client in that situation doesn't know the benefits of working that way, that's the communication, right? That right, Griffin. I mean, that's really what it is. It's not. There's no secret recipe. There's no, hey, we do it this way or that way, right? I mean, that's in my opinion, we're professional services, right? So it is our job to articulate why it is beneficial to do it that way, right? And
Yeah.
and really, when I was saying it earlier, that goes to humility, right? And that's leadership, right? Take your personal agenda out of it, right? On both sides, right? Have humility, listen. And a lot of those times, Griffin, that pushback from the client is just because they might not understand what that will do to their day to day, or they might not understand how that's going to move their cheese, right?
Yeah.
And to your point, in that situation, which happens, and for the folks probably watching us, right? That happens in variations, hundreds of thousands of times across all these projects. And that 10 minutes to take that email or that 10-minute one-on-one conversation to say, hey, Griffin, I know, right? I know there's a little bit of like content here, right? Discontent about the ways of working. Here's why, as a architect, this is super important to me. I really think it's going to benefit you. What are your apprehensions? It's a 15, 20-minute conversation. Even if it's an hour, to your point, Griffin, for it to maybe have cascading effects on months and years of work, right? It's taking that 30 minutes. It's having that emotional intelligence to go, you know what, this isn't sitting right with the client. We need to make sure they feel aligned here, for sure.
Yeah, when it turned into 2 months after we decided to do what we wanted to do, then the client's like, hey, why are we doing this, why is it not working like this? And then we explain it again, and then a month after that, hey, why is it like this? And then a month after that, hey, I don't like this, why, this is a bug. I'm like, no, this is what we discussed, whatever. But yeah, I could probably talk about that forever. I'd love to, I don't know if you have anything else to add on that, but I'd love to transition us, kick our feet up to the after hours happy hour segment of the show. I mean, we haven't talked about it at all, but you're a sports guy, you like lacrosse, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'd love to hear more about, just who you are, your personality a little bit, why you're so passionate about sports and everything. I don't know how old your kids are, but I'm sure you're instilling them in sports, right? It's
Absolutely.
like, hey, you can play whatever sport you want to, but it's going to be lacrosse,
No. For me, I think, who I am, it's interesting, right? College coaching to me, if you asked me 3 years ago, I would have been in it the rest of my life, right? And I think when we talk about chapters in our life, for me, the most important thing is being the best dad I can be. And coaching made that challenging, right?
Yeah.
It made it challenging. And I look at it as an incredible chapter, right? And to your point, Griffin, where I'm at, to be able to still coach, right? But now drive value, right? And a lot of my experiences, undergrad, right? Everything was business focused, right? I had an unbelievable opportunity, right, to coach at my alma mater, a place that I played coach with a mentor, and I wouldn't trade that up for anything. One of the best experiences of my life, and all of those things and translating them to consulting have just been a breath of fresh air for me, right? And given me the confidence that I had in coaching. But I'm a fisherman. My son and I and daughter, that's how we kind of explored our new ways out here, right, in Ohio. But, I think the coaching hat to me and being that way it's more about, I genuinely, relationships fill my cup. And it's not a corny thing, it's the truth, right? I think anyone that works with me, I try to get to know them as a person, have that relationship. That, to me, gets me through the day. That is my coffee, right? I need to be able to have a relationship with my teammates, feel that we are a team driving towards things. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of people are starving for that at work, because I've never had anyone that I've tried to engage like that push me off, right? If anything, it's refreshing, and you realize, hey, for 15 minutes, I just vented about my day. Now I can go execute what I need to, right? So, relationship builder, dot connector, right? Someone at work called me the other day Dr. Elmer's, right? Like the glue guy, right? I'll take it all. But I think of more than anything, right? It's everything that we do as a company, as an individual. It's about how we can improve the experience of the people we are working with. That, to me, as a coach, was the same thing. How can I improve your 4 years here at XYZ University, right? And so that hasn't changed. The stakeholders are a little older, right?
Yeah, right.
In the colleges. But, when you were saying the coaching thing, for me, just to give a little more Snapple fact, I love lacrosse, but I played lacrosse because it was the only sport I could play at the highest level. Right? And I mean that wholeheartedly. So right now, Duke, my son, he's a baseball guy, right? He might stay a baseball guy, and if he wants to, he can. Same thing with my daughter, right? So, no, it's like I said, the sports thing, right? To your point, Griffin, I think it's more about, right? Yeah, it's the activity, it's all of those things, but it's team. If you're into sports, right, you're into teamwork, and you're into if you're into sports and teamwork, you're into the unbelievable output when a team comes together, right? I think, it's interesting, right? All of your success you've had in athletics or in working professional, those always boil down to maybe you think of like that big game or that win, but it wasn't, right? It was all of those experiences, all of those things leading up to it. And when you have time to reflect on that, it's a pretty cool thing. for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Doc, man, the conversation has been great. I've been loving just connecting with you and getting to talk to you. If somebody was listening to this and was impacted and wanted to connect with you, what would be the best way to get in contact with you?
Shoot me a message on LinkedIn, and I'll give you my email, and we'll set up some time. No, I think, for me, always looking to talk through folks about, kind of like you're saying, how do we distill things down to the client, make things digestible, and articulate that value in a very tangible way, right? So
Yeah.
I appreciate the time, Griffin, right? This has been awesome. You got me excited.
Yeah.
Really appreciate the opportunity, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll have a link to your LinkedIn down in the description down below. Thanks again, man. Thank you to you for sticking to end the video. My name is Griffin Lickfeld, the host of the Citizen Developer channel, and I'm excited to connect with you in the next one.